The day I wore my wedding dress, I thought I was walking into a new life. The air smelled like white roses and champagne, and everyone around me smiled like they were watching a fairy tale come true. But what they didn't know was that my fairy tale was built on lies. My name is Grace Miller, and this is how marrying the man of my dreams turned into the biggest mistake of my life. It all started 2 years ago at my best friend's engagement party. I wasn't even supposed to attend. I had a work deadline that night. But something in me said, "Go out, Grace. You deserve one night of fun." That's when I first met Ethan Carter. He was everything I'd never imagined for myself. Confident, well-dressed, and with that dangerous kind of charm that makes you forget where you are. I remember he smiled when he saw me struggling with my drink and said, "If the glass is too heavy, maybe I should hold it for you." I laughed, rolled my eyes, and told him I didn't need help. But deep down, that small, teasing grin stuck with me all night. By the end of the evening, we'd danced, talked, and exchanged numbers. For weeks, he called me every night. His voice became my comfort, his promises, my escape from a life that already felt like a cage. You see, my father, Richard Miller, was one of the most powerful real estate developers in Chicago. But to me, he was just a man who loved control more than people. Every choice in my life, from what I studied to who I dated, had to meet his approval. Ethan was the first man who didn't seem intimidated by my father's influence. That confidence made me fall harder. Within 6 months, he proposed. And for the first time, I didn't ask for my father's permission. I just said yes. Our wedding was grand. Too grand, maybe. My father's mansion lit up with thousands of lights. Reporters waited outside. Everyone called it the match of the year. But I didn't care about the cameras. All I saw was Ethan, looking at me like I was the only person in the world. When he lifted my veil and whispered, "You look perfect, Grace," I believed him. But even that night, something felt off. I remember catching a strange look in Ethan's eyes when he shook hands with my father. A tight smile, a pause that lasted just a second too long. My father noticed it too, the kind of stare that carried a silent war. Later, when I asked my father what was wrong, he simply said, "Some people smile too easily when they're hiding something." I brushed it off. I didn't want to ruin my wedding night with his suspicions. The first few months of our marriage felt magical. Ethan was thoughtful, affectionate, and always knew how to make me laugh. He'd leave little notes before leaving for work. "Don't forget breakfast," or "I miss you already." But then slowly, things started changing. He became distant. He started coming home late, avoiding questions about work, spending hours on calls he wouldn't explain. When I asked if something was wrong, he smiled and said, "You worry too much, Grace. Just trust me." Trust him, I tried. But one night, I woke up to find him sitting in his office, going through a box of old documents with my father's name on them. When he realized I was standing there, he shut the laptop immediately and said he was working on an investment plan. I didn't believe him, but I didn't want to start a fight. I convinced myself I was just paranoid. Until one day, while doing laundry, I found an envelope in his jacket pocket. It wasn't a love letter or business paperwork. It was a confidential contract, with my father's company logo on it. My hands trembled as I read the first line. Acquisition of Miller Holdings, Phase 2, Internal Partnership Strategy. My mind froze. Why would my husband be involved in a project targeting my father's company? That evening when he returned, I asked about it. His expression didn't change. He just smiled, leaned in, and said, "You shouldn't snoop around, Grace. It's not good for a wife to be so curious." The coldness in his voice sent chills through me. Over the next few weeks, the distance between us turned into silence. Ethan barely looked at me. When he did, his eyes no longer carried love, just calculation. And then one night, I overheard a phone call that shattered my world. "Yes," he said quietly. "The plan's almost complete. Her father will lose everything. She won't even see it coming." I froze behind the door, every muscle in my body screaming. He was talking about my father, about me. I didn't know whether to scream or cry. All I knew was that the man I had given my heart to was the same man planning to destroy my family. That night, I couldn't sleep. I stared at Ethan lying beside me, pretending to be the loving husband he once was. My mind raced. What did my father do to him? Why would Ethan marry me if he hated us so much? But there was one thing I knew for sure: this wasn't love anymore. It was war. And for the first time in my life, I wasn't going to let someone else control my story. Didn't confront Ethan that night. I couldn't. My entire body felt numb. My husband, the man who once held my hand like I was his world, was plotting to destroy everything connected to me. For days, I walked through the house like a ghost, pretending everything was fine, smiling when he looked, nodding when he spoke, but inside I was falling apart. I needed answers, not assumptions, not guesses, proof. So one morning, after Ethan left for work, I searched through his office again. My hands shook as I opened drawers, folders, and files. That's when I found a black leather file hidden behind some books. It contained old photos, legal documents, and something that froze my blood. A court transcript from 15 years ago. On the front page, it read, State of Illinois versus Daniel Carter. Daniel Carter, Ethan's father. The case was about a land fraud investigation, and the name of the person who testified against Daniel was printed clearly, Richard Miller. My father? I sank to the floor, my heart pounding. It suddenly made sense. The cold glances between them, the strange tension at our wedding. Ethan's father had gone to prison because of mine. And now Ethan had married me to destroy the man who destroyed his family. I covered my mouth, trying not to cry. For years, I had begged my father to tell me why he was always so suspicious of people. Maybe he already knew who Ethan really was. When Ethan returned that evening, I tried to act normal. He noticed I was quiet and asked if something was wrong. I smiled and said, Just tired? He kissed my forehead, that same gentle gesture I used to love, and went upstairs. I stared after him, wondering how someone could lie so beautifully. That night, I couldn't hold it in anymore. I drove to my father's house, tears running down my face the entire way. When I walked in, he looked up from his desk, confused. Grace, what's wrong? I slammed the file down in front of him. You knew, I said, my voice shaking. You knew who he was, didn't you? My father's face turned pale as he flipped through the pages. His jaw clenched. Where did you get this? Answer me, Dad, I shouted. Did you know Ethan is Daniel Carter's son? He didn't speak for a long moment. Then he sighed, leaning back in his chair. Yes, he said finally. I knew. My knees nearly gave out. Then why didn't you stop me from marrying him? He looked at me with tired eyes. Because I thought I could handle it. I thought if I kept quiet, if I gave him no reason to hate us anymore, maybe it would all go away. I stared at him, disbelief turning into anger. You let me marry him, knowing he might want revenge? He stood up, his voice rising. I did what I thought was best. His father ruined dozens of families, Grace. I had to testify. If I hadn't, I'd be the one in prison now. His words echoed in the room, but all I heard was betrayal. Both the men in my life had lied to me. One for revenge, the other for pride. I left without another word. That night, sitting in my car in the pouring rain, I realized something. I couldn't trust either of them. But I wasn't going to be their pawn anymore. If Ethan wanted revenge, he was about to meet a different Grace, one who knew how to fight back quietly. The next morning, I made breakfast like nothing was wrong. He came downstairs, kissed my cheek, and said, You're quiet again. I smiled. Just thinking about a business idea. He laughed. You? Business? You'd rather be painting. Maybe I can do both, I said lightly. You never know what I'm capable of. He didn't notice the edge in my voice. For the next few weeks, I played the perfect wife. Caring, sweet, supportive. But behind that smile, I was gathering information. I met with my father's old lawyer, I spoke to contacts at Miller Holdings, and I quietly began digging into Ethan's new company, Carter Enterprise. What I discovered stunned me. Ethan's company was built on forged contracts and stolen data from my father's business. He had been working with a small group of insiders from Miller Holdings who helped him access confidential files. I took pictures of everything, copied every document I could find. Each new piece of evidence made my chest tighten. This wasn't just revenge. This was destruction. Ethan wasn't just trying to ruin my father. He was trying to bankrupt every project connected to my family's name. But karma has its timing. One afternoon, I saw Ethan leave for a business meeting and decided to follow him. He drove to a hotel downtown. I parked 2 blocks away and waited, my heart racing. Through the glass doors, I saw him meet a woman, tall, elegant, wearing a red coat. They hugged like old lovers. I couldn't breathe. For an hour, they sat close, whispering, exchanging papers. When he touched her hand, my vision blurred. I wanted to burst in, scream, demand the truth. But I didn't. I took pictures instead. Every hug, every whisper, every paper they exchanged. When he came home that night and asked how my day was, I smiled. Wonderful, I said. Just wonderful. Because now I finally had everything I needed. The proof of his affair, the evidence of his fraud, and the motive for his revenge. But I wasn't ready to strike yet. Not until I understood the why. Why did he blame me for what my father did? Why couldn't he just confront the truth instead of destroying lives? That answer would come soon. And when it did, it would break me even more. That night, as I lay beside him, I whispered silently to myself, "You started this war, Ethan, but I'll be the one to end it." For days, I couldn't stop thinking about what I'd seen at that hotel. Ethan with another woman, his soft smile, that familiar charm he once used on me. Every touch he gave her, I'd once believed was mine. But even more than the betrayal, what haunted me was why. Why did he hate us so much? Why did he still wear his wedding ring while plotting my father's downfall? I decided I needed to know everything about his past. Not just what my father had done, but who Ethan really was. So one afternoon, I drove to a small town an hour outside Chicago, the place listed on his birth record. It was quiet, peaceful, the kind of place where people still waved at strangers. I found the local diner, ordered coffee, and showed the waitress a picture of Ethan. Her expression softened instantly. "That's Danny's boy, right? The Carter's kid?" My heart skipped. "You knew them?" "Everyone here knew them. His dad used to run a construction business. Good man. Till the scandal." I leaned in. "What scandal?" The woman sighed. Word was someone set him up. They said he falsified land ownership papers, but a lot of folks believed he was innocent. He went to prison for almost 10 years. His wife got sick not long after. Cancer. She died before he got out. I froze. And Ethan? Moved away soon after the funeral. Poor boy, never spoke to anyone again. Her words cut deep. For the first time, I saw Ethan not as my husband or my enemy, but as a broken child who'd lost everything. Still, pain doesn't justify destruction. He chose to turn his grief into vengeance, and I was the collateral damage. When I got home, Ethan was sitting in the living room going through emails. He didn't notice me at first. His jaw was tight, his eyes cold. The same man I'd once thought was gentle. "Rough day?" I asked softly. He looked up, startled. "Oh, Grace, no, just business." Business? The word almost made me laugh. "You mean the kind that involves destroying my father's company?" His eyes narrowed slightly, his expression unreadable. "What are you talking about?" I smiled sadly. "I know everything, Ethan. About my father, about your father, about how you used me to get access to his files." He stood up, his calm demeanor cracking for the first time. "You went through my things?" "I had to," I said quietly, "because my husband turned into a stranger." He ran a hand through his hair, pacing. "You don't understand what your father did. My dad wasn't guilty. He was framed. And your father made sure he went to prison. Do you have any idea what that did to us?" My throat tightened. "I'm sorry for what happened to your family, but destroying mine won't bring yours back." He turned sharply toward me, his voice trembling. "You think this is about revenge? He ruined my father's name. My mother died believing her husband was a criminal. I lived with that shame every single day. So yes, I wanted your father to feel what we felt." I stared at him, not angry anymore, just heartbroken. "And what about me, Ethan? Did you ever love me? Or was I just a weapon in your plan?" He didn't answer right away. His silence said everything. When he finally spoke, his voice was quiet. "I tried not to fall for you, but somewhere along the way, I did. And that made everything worse." Tears burned my eyes. "Worse for who? You? Because now your revenge isn't so clean?" He looked away, ashamed. That night, I sat alone in my room, unable to sleep. My heart still wanted to believe there was some part of Ethan that loved me, but my mind knew better. So I focused on what mattered most, ending this nightmare once and for all. The next morning, I called my father. "I need your help," I said coldly, "but not your interference." He hesitated. "Grace, what are you planning?" "I'm planning justice and not revenge. There's a difference." Then I hung up. For the next few weeks, I worked silently. Using the evidence I'd gathered, I reached out to Carter Enterprises investors, warning them of forged contracts and illegal transactions. I sent anonymous reports to the State Financial Bureau, attaching proof of data theft. But my final move had to be personal, to be poetic. Ethan was planning a major event, a partnership signing that would officially merge his company with another powerful firm. The event was going to be televised. All his investors, the media, everyone watching. And I was going to be there too. On the night of the event, I dressed elegantly, calm, composed, unreadable. When I arrived, Ethan looked surprised but didn't say anything. Cameras flashed as he gave his speech, praising his journey, resilience, and vision. I stood quietly at the back, waiting for my moment. Then, just as the signing ceremony began, an officer entered the hall. The crowd murmured as he walked up to Ethan, holding a document. "Mr. Carter," the officer said, "you're under investigation for corporate fraud and data theft. We need you to come with us." The silence that followed was deafening. Ethan turned to me, shock, anger, and heartbreak written across his face. "You did this?" he whispered. I met his eyes and said softly, "No, Ethan, you did this to yourself." As security escorted him away, I felt my heart break all over again. I didn't smile. I didn't celebrate. I just stood there, staring at the man who once promised to love me forever, and chose destruction instead. That night, I went home, took off my ring, and placed it on the kitchen counter. The silence felt heavy, but peaceful. Revenge wasn't satisfaction, it was closure. I had protected my family, cleared my father's name, and freed myself from a love that was never real. But deep down, I knew this wasn't the end, because Ethan Carter wasn't the kind of man who stayed silent in defeat. And I had a feeling his story with me wasn't finished yet. The days after the truth came out felt like walking on glass. Every word between Ethan and me carried the weight of everything unspoken. Every betrayal, every misunderstanding, every half-confession that had built the wall between us. He had stopped sleeping in the same room. I could hear him pacing the hallway at night, the sound of his restless footsteps haunting me like a reminder of what we had become. Enemies under one roof, but this time it wasn't hate that kept us apart. It was guilt. One night, I found him standing outside on the balcony looking over the city. The wind tousled his hair, and the moonlight caught the lines of exhaustion on his face. I hesitated for a second, but then I walked out. He didn't turn when I spoke. "You can't keep doing this forever." His voice was low, almost broken. "Doing what?" "Punishing yourself," I said, my tone softer than I intended. "You're not the only one who made mistakes." He finally looked at me. His eyes were tired, but still carried that same fierce spark I had fallen for, without realizing it. "I lied to you, Claire. I used you. Everything between us started because of hate. How do you forgive that?" I took a slow breath. "Because I'm tired of hating you." He blinked. "You, what?" I stepped closer, my heart pounding so loud I could barely hear myself speak. "You think I don't know what it's like to live with guilt? I hated you for ruining my life, but somewhere in the middle of all the chaos, I stopped seeing you as the enemy." Ethan turned away, gripping the railing. "You shouldn't. I don't deserve that." I wanted to reach out to touch his hand, but I didn't. Instead, I said quietly, "Maybe not, but I still care." He looked at me then, really looked at me, as if seeing me for the first time. The silence stretched between us, and for a moment, it felt like the air itself was holding its breath. Then, without warning, he whispered, "Claire, I think I'm in love with you." My heart stopped. Of all the things I'd imagined hearing from him, that was not one. I laughed softly, not because it was funny, but because it was absurd. "You're in love with your enemy?" He nodded once, serious. "I guess I am." For a long moment, I said nothing. Then I took a step closer, until the space between us was filled with the tension we'd been running from for months. "Then maybe we were never enemies to begin with," I said. Ethan reached out and brushed his fingers against mine, hesitant, almost afraid, but I didn't pull away. That night changed everything. The next morning, he made coffee for both of us. It was the first normal thing we'd done together since our wedding. When I walked into the kitchen, he smiled, awkward, shy, but real. "You like it black, right?" he asked. I smiled back. "You remembered." "I remember everything about you," he said softly. We talked for hours, about the past, about our mistakes, about what had driven us to hurt each other. For the first time, there were no lies, no sharp words, no hidden motives, just honesty. Painful, but freeing. Ethan confessed that his father's company had gone bankrupt because of mine, but that his father's version of the story had been twisted. "He told me your father betrayed us," he said. "But when I saw the files, I realized it wasn't true. My father had been lying to me all along." I didn't know what to say. My world had been built on anger toward him, and now it turned out both of us had been manipulated. That night, I went to the guest room where he'd been sleeping. He looked surprised when I knocked. "Can I come in?" He nodded, and I stepped inside. I hesitated before saying, "I don't want to keep living like this. I want to start over, not as enemies, maybe as something else." He stood up slowly, closing the distance between us. "Something else?" I smiled faintly. "Yeah, like partners." He reached up and brushed a loose strand of hair behind my ear. "I'd like that." We stood there for what felt like forever, not saying another word, just feeling the quiet peace that had been missing for so long. But peace, I realized, doesn't last forever. The next morning, a call shattered everything. Ethan's assistant came rushing in with panic written all over his face. "Sir, the board found out about the merger. They think you leaked the documents to Claire's company. They're threatening to remove you." Ethan's expression froze. "What?" I felt my stomach twist. "That's not true. You didn't..." He turned to me, jaw tight. "Someone's framing me, again." And just like that, the war we thought had ended was starting again. The news spread faster than wildfire. Within hours, headlines were everywhere. Ethan Gray accused of corporate espionage. CEO under fire for betrayal and secret merger. Every whisper, every headline, every post painted him as the villain. Again. I stood beside him in his office, watching as he slammed his phone onto the desk. "They want me gone, Claire. The board's calling for an emergency vote. If I lose my position, everything I built, everything we worked for, it's over." I could see the fury and desperation in his eyes, but beneath it all, there was something else. Fear. Fear of losing me. "Who did this?" I asked, stepping closer. "Who leaked those documents?" He shook his head. "I don't know, but whoever it is, they knew exactly what they were doing." A chilling thought hit me. "Ethan, what if it's your father?" His eyes snapped up to meet mine. "My father?" "Think about it," I said quickly. "He lied to you before, turned you against me, and blamed my family for his failures. He's always wanted control of the company, of your life." Ethan's face paled. "You think he would destroy his own son just to regain power?" I nodded grimly. "Yes, because to him, control matters more than family." He was silent for a long moment. Then he whispered, "I need proof." We spent the entire night digging through old files, emails, and transaction logs. Hours passed, the clock ticking closer to dawn, our hands trembling with exhaustion and adrenaline. Then, just as the first light of morning spilled through the blinds, Ethan froze. "Claire, look at this." It was an encrypted email sent from his father's account to a board member, dated a week before the merger leak. The message was short but damning. "Once Ethan is out of the picture, the company will be mine again. Do what's necessary." My heart pounded. "That's it, that's the proof." Ethan slumped into his chair, his voice breaking. "He was behind everything, every lie, every manipulation. He ruined both of us." I knelt beside him, taking his hand. "Then let's finish this, together." Later that morning, the board meeting began. The room was tense, filled with sharp suits and colder eyes. Ethan stood at the front, every movement calm and deliberate, though I could see the storm raging inside him. One of the board members sneered, "Mr. Gray, you've brought shame to this company. You leaked private documents to your wife's firm for personal gain." Ethan's voice was steady. "No, I didn't, but I know who did." He tapped his laptop and the projector flickered to life, displaying the email. A hush fell over the room. The man who had accused him looked pale. That can't be real." Ethan's jaw tightened. "It's real. My father sent it. He orchestrated everything to regain control of the company and pit us against each other. He wanted revenge, not justice." Gasps echoed around the table. For a moment, no one spoke. Then the chairman leaned forward. "Is this true, Mr. Gray?" Ethan's father stood at the back of the room, silent, his expression unreadable. Then slowly he smiled, a bitter, hollow smile. "You've always been too emotional, Ethan. I did what had to be done." "You destroyed your own son!" Ethan shouted. "You destroyed us!" The older man didn't flinch. "You were weak. Love made you weak." That was the final blow. Ethan's voice trembled, not with anger but sorrow. "Then I'd rather be weak than heartless." Security escorted his father out as the board voted unanimously to keep Ethan as CEO. The room erupted with murmurs, but I didn't care. I only saw Ethan standing there, finally free. When we got home, the silence felt different. Not heavy, not painful, peaceful. Ethan poured 2 glasses of wine and handed me one. "To the end of a war," he said quietly. I smiled. "To new beginnings." We clinked glasses, but before I could take a sip, he took my hand. "Claire, I don't know what the future looks like, but I know I don't want it without you." My heart melted. "You sure? You married your enemy once." He laughed softly, "And fell in love with her anyway." I laughed too, tears pricking my eyes. "Then maybe love wins after all." He brushed his thumb across my cheek, his voice barely above a whisper. "It always does, if you let it." The city lights glowed behind us, reflecting off the glass like 1,000 tiny stars. For the first time in a long time, I wasn't haunted by the past or afraid of what came next. I was exactly where I was meant to be, beside the man who had once been my greatest enemy, and was now my greatest love.